Hello everyone, I think it's safe to say long time no see, but I'm finally back with a new video. Today I'm going to make an updated video on how I take notes, and this is going to be a combination of both lecture notes and textbook notes. During my first semester of university, I've tried out different techniques for note-taking, and I've finally found the way that works best for me. So I'm going to share some of the tips that have helped me take notes that are both efficient and neat, and I hope that they can help you as well. For me, my note-taking process starts the day before the lecture. The first thing I do is that I quickly skim through the topics for the upcoming lecture, and this is just to get an overview of what I'm going to learn so that I'm a bit more prepared. Once I've skimmed through the pages, I like to just write down some keywords on a piece of paper. This is going to be my checklist for later to make sure I've included all of the central topics and concepts in my notes once they're finished. During lectures, I prefer using grid paper for my notes. I feel like the grid is a big support when it comes to making my notes neat and organized, and it also makes the spacing between the lines more narrow, which is useful for those of us with small handwriting. I also prefer loose leaf paper over notebooks, just because I don't have to deal with the spiral getting in the way, and also because I put my notes in a binder when they're finished. When it comes to stationery, lately I've been mostly using erasable pens. That way I don't have to cross over or use whiteout on any mistakes, and I can also just change my notes as much as I like. The pens I use the most are the Pilot Friction 0.5mm pens for writing, then the thicker Pilot Friction pens for coloring, and the Uniball Signo erasable pens for some extra colors. You should keep in mind that these pens may be erased by friction, heat, and other things, but if you are a bit careful, you shouldn't have too much trouble with them. If there isn't already a margin on the paper I use, I'll quickly make one before I start writing, just to get some extra space that I will use later. A good tip for keeping your notes neat and organized is to have a certain system for organizing what you write that you stick to. For example, I start a new paragraph for each concept, then I use bullet points to add extra information related to that concept, and I use arrows to include short examples related to the current topic. I also write any calculation examples in a box towards the middle of the page, which lets me find them easily if I go through my notes at a later point looking for a particular calculation. I also use these kind of cloud boxes to include any additional important information that doesn't necessarily fit into one of the paragraphs. My point isn't that you should try to copy this particular note-taking system, but that you find one that works for you. Having a system helps you in keeping your notes organized, and you also spend less time figuring out the layout of your notes. Another thing that I've been doing for a while is using a colored pen to write down important terms. When I skim through my notes later while revising them, I can easily see the most important terms, and I also feel like the process of changing pens and taking a bit of extra time to write down these terms helps me in remembering them. Another tip to save time while taking notes is to use abbreviations as much as you can. Just make sure that you remember what the abbreviations mean so that you don't get confused while looking through your notes later. A final thing that I've found to be very useful during lectures is to make space for diagrams that the professor goes through, but waiting to draw them until after the lecture. As you may know, diagrams is one of the things that I learned the most from, and therefore a central part of my notes, and I've found that by drawing them when the lecture is over lets me make them more detailed so I can learn more from them, while I also get to revise the topic while drawing the diagrams. I usually return to my lecture notes either later the same day or the day after the lecture. I start by quickly reading through them so that I remember the topic well before I continue working on them. The first thing I'll do is to draw the diagrams we went through during the lecture. Drawing them at home means that I can spend more time making them detailed and understandable, and I also know that I'm only spending time on diagrams that are directly relevant to the topics we've actually learned about. If I find that there are other diagrams from the textbook that are relevant, I will of course draw them as well, but most of the time I've just used the ones that my professors have used. Then I will return to the checklist I made in the beginning and see if we've covered all the central topics. If we're missing anything, I'll add it to my notes, and I also use the margin to add any additional important information, more examples, or any details that I feel is important to include. After this, I will read through my notes once again, and I sometimes use a highlighter for this step to highlight what I feel are the most important points in my notes. The last thing I'll do is that I will write a brief summary at the bottom of the page where I focus on the main ideas and also the concepts I found to be the most difficult ones. And then I can use the summary when I want to quickly revise my notes before a test or an exam. Finally, a completely optional last step is to take a couple of minutes to make your notes look neater if you feel like it. I usually don't do this myself, but if my notes look especially messy or if I just want to do something creative during a study break, I might change the title, make the subheadings a bit fancier, or just anything that makes my notes more appealing to study later. This is of course not necessary though, and if you don't feel like doing it, you definitely should not feel like you have to. So that is it for how I take notes, and I hope this could help you in figuring out your own note-taking process. Remember that everyone has different techniques that work for them, and if you have any tips for note-taking that you find useful, then do feel free to share them with everyone in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with